Mr. Hickox, what year did you go into the military?
In 1950.
1950. Were you drafted?
No, I had volunteered.
You volunteered. Which branch did you join?
Well, I didn't know what it was going to be.
Uh-huh.
When I went to Fort Riley for basic training,
Uh-huh.
and then I became a private first class.
Okay.
I went to I went to a leadership school,
Uh-huh.
and so when I got through with that, I made corporal,
Oh, okay.
2 stripes.
Yeah.
And then about that time, then I was picked to go to Korea.
You were?
Yeah, this was 1951.
1951. So you volunteered to join the Army.
Yeah,
The
but
Army
see,
thing. Yeah.
I had been I was in the Army 3 months, and the Koreas started the war.
Oh, so the war began after you had joined.
June 25th,
Oh.
1950.
Oh.
And I had an agreement with the Army that they, when I got out, or when I got through the basic, they would send me to Fort Belvoir, Virginia, and I would study maps.
You would study maps.
That was my thing, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
Of course, when the Chinese came in, the North Koreans, my maps went out the window.
So what did you do? So then the Army, they said, we have other work for you, so not maps. So what work did you do then with the Army?
Well, I mean, I was made corporal, and so I was assigned to BAR. A BAR.
So the Browning, is that the Browning automatic rifle?
20-pound rifle.
Yeah.
Plus, ammunition.
Yeah.
Anyway, I was not crazy about that, but and then when Korea started and got all of the fighting going on, BAR men didn't last very long because they were out front.
They're right out front. Yeah, yeah.
But, so anyway, I was sent then to, I got my papers, and I had a month's pass. I came home and spent at home in West Plains, Missouri. I was there for a month, and then I had to go up and report to San Francisco to ship out.
Okay.
And
so then you took a ship from San Francisco to, where did you arrive in South Korea?
well, we boarded. But that one thing I want to tell you, on this ship, it was there in the harbor, and the day that we actually shipped out was on June 25th. And I didn't realize till I was digging through this, that was 1 year from the time I joined the Army.
Oh, so 1 year exactly.
I mean, the Army, the war started. It was exactly, and I didn't even realize it. But anyway,
so
we
exactly 1 year after the war began, you shipped out. Yeah.
We were waiting on the dock there, and this other ship, our ship, was unloading all these GIs. Most of them were shot up and one thing, and they were bandaged. Some of them had lost limbs, and we're sitting there watching all of this as they unloaded all those guys.
Yeah.
But the band from the Fort Mason band played a song that I never heard before, but it was such a beautiful thing, and it just lodged in my brain, and nobody ever knew what the name of it was or anything. But it was taken. I mean, that music was "My Hero" from the Chocolate Soldier, and this was written back with I can't say his name now, but anyway, this is 1910, I guess, when he wrote this.
Yeah.
But anyway, then this had been brought to Broadway, and it played there for a year.
Oh.
But that music was so beautiful, and I still have it in my head.
Do you know that song?
Yeah.
Can you sing a little for us?
Well, I've got it written down over there somewhere.
Okay.
It was, and then when we got ready, after they unloaded all those and we were boarding, they started playing the band, Now Is the Hour.
Oh.
And that was real popular after World War II.
Yeah.
So
these guys are getting off the boat.
Yeah.
And these guys are getting off the boat, and they're playing this song, "The Chocolate Soldier."
Yeah,
Is that what
see,
it's called?
all these other guys have been shot
Yeah.
up, and the ones coming back home,
Yeah,
we followed on, and we had to load up, you know.
yeah. And
They were
then
playing "Now Is the Hour."
when you guys get on, they're playing "Now Is the Hour." Do you remember the kinds of thoughts you had when you saw those guys getting off the boats and you saw that a lot of them were wounded? Do you remember the kinds of thoughts you had when you
Well,
saw these guys get off the boat wounded?
you're scared because you don't really know what's going to happen next.
Yeah.
But I was very fortunate. I was a corporal. When we got on board ship and we started sailing, we went under the big bridge, the Golden Gate Bridge. We went under it,
Yeah, yeah.
and we all threw pennies, you know, and made a wish, you know, and all that.
Do you remember what your wish was?
No.
No,
30
okay.
years later, though, I
Uh-huh.
got to drive over that. And that was a thrill to me, knowing that
Golden Gate.
I went under it, and then I got to drive over it.
Yeah. When you arrived in South Korea, do you remember where you arrived in South Korea?
We went to Japan first.
Oh, you went to Japan.
Yeah, we went to
Okay.
Japan, and then loaded. That took us 14 days from San Francisco to Japan. 14 days, and we were crowded in there. You know, it was. You only had about in your bunk. You only had about this much
All
room.
right.
To the
You're living
next
like
guy, you know.
living like a Navy man for a while. Yeah.
And the food, some of them weren't too happy about that, and it was hot.
Oh.
And I was a corporal. I could get out and go up topside
Oh.
anytime I wanted to.
Get up in the air.
Which was a great.
Yeah. On the ship, did you train on the ship, or
Did what?
on the ship did you train? How did you spend your time on the ship when you were going to Japan? How did you spend your time on the ship?
Well, I had a book. I was reading Hitler's book.
Mein Kampf?
Yeah, Mein Kampf.
Really? Wow.
I found that somewhere, and I had that in my duffel bag, and I was trying to read that. I'd be up topside. Anyway, but you could watch the whales and one thing and another, you know.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
I did finally finish it. But anyway,
How,
and then we arrived in Yokohama,
uh-huh.
and we were there for 2 days.
Okay.
We had to get off and onto another ship.
Okay.
And so we
Yeah.
had, and so we went there from there up to Incheon, China, North
Incheon.
Korea.
Yeah.
And Incheon was
Yeah.
the place where,
MacArthur.
MacArthur made that
Uh-huh.
big thing. What do you call it? The water.
Well, the invasion at Incheon and when
Yeah,
MacArthur
shoot,
came
I
through.
went blank.
Uh-huh.
Anyway, you know, the water, the waves come in at a certain time of day. And
Yeah.
it's very high there.
Oh, the tide.
The tide.
Yeah, yeah.
I couldn't say tide.
Yeah.
They told MacArthur he was crazy. But he says, well, if we time it right, it'll work. And it did. And so
yeah.
we had to wait until the time was right, and
Yeah.
we got to Incheon,
Yeah.
and then we have to go over the side. We had our weapon, and we had a duffel bag, and we're going down the rope, you know, down into the small boats to take us over there, you know.
To take you into South Korea. So you went from San Francisco to Yokohama. Yokohama, you changed ships.
Right.
And then from Japan into Incheon. I just want to go back to Mein Kampf. Were you reading that for historical interest, or it just happened to be the only book available at the time? Or
I happened to see that thing laying
Yeah.
around or somewhere, I don't know, but
Yeah.
I stuck it in my duffel bag, and so
Yeah.
and I didn't have anything else to do. I didn't have to stay down below.
Yeah.
I could be upstairs where it was up on deck where it was
Sure.
cool, you know, and everything.
Yeah.
And so I'd try to read that.
Yeah.
It was over my head, but anyway.
Yeah. Well, crazy as it is, it's an influential book, all for the bad, unfortunately. But now, so on the ship you're reading in Japan, you did not have enough time to train. What are your first memories of Korea?
Well, the Lord was looking out for me. I mean, I've been very fortunate all the way along. When I got to Incheon there, and we were in a repel depot, where they people transfer through all the time, you know.
Yeah.
They call them a repel depot. And anyway, I was there, let's see, this third day, I guess it was. And we were all sitting there, you know, waiting for somebody to tell us something. And this sergeant came by, he had a clipboard.
Uh-huh.
And he said, I need 6 guys for a tank outfit. You.
Wow,
And I
okay.
was a canker.
So you go from maps to the
didn't have-
Browning automatic
I
rifle, now
got
to
rid of that
tanks.
BAR.
Yeah.
That was scary. I got rid of that BAR, gave that back to him, and I became a tanker. I'd only looked at the inside of a tank one time in my life.
Wow, good grief.
So anyway, then we took a little old narrow railroad on up the road there, and we hooked up with our uniform.
Now, what was your job on the tank? What was your
Well,
job
I
on the
became-
tank?
I didn't know beans, but I was a corporal. They were having problems. They didn't have enough enlisted men.
Yeah.
So they gave me a fast, whatever you want to call it, to learn. I'd learned how to drive first, and they had a bow gunner, the machine gunner. That wasn't a big deal, but
Yeah.
I learned how to drive, and then how to fire. You know, look through the glasses and try to. I was good
Yeah.
at that, except I wasn't good at picking distance. I wasn't that
see.
good.
Yeah. Wow.
But anyway, I learned all of those things, the
Yeah.
different steps,
Yeah.
and then I became the tank commander
Okay.
of Bloody Bucket.
Bloody Bucket.
Bloody Bucket. I've got pictures of it.
That's the name of your tank?
Well, this particular unit there is we were with the 70 Tank Battalion, and they have a platoon of tanks. There's 4 tanks in a platoon, and each one of those tanks were named with a double B, since we were in Company B.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So I was Bloody Bucket, and there was Brooklyn Baby and Bama Baby and something else.
Yeah. Wow.
But anyway, I became the tank commander,
Yeah.
and then let's see, about 6 months or no, it was less than that. About a month later, then I made sergeant. I was a
Okay.
corporal, then I made sergeant, 3 stripes,
Yeah.
and
yeah.
that was my tank. And so
Wow.
anyway,
Now-
I had a best driver in the country, you know,
Wow.
an old country boy from Kentucky,
Uh-huh.
and he could fix anything, and he
Yeah.
was the best.
How many different tanks did you serve on?
How many? What?
How many different tanks did you serve on? Just the one.
Just the one.
So was your one tank ever?
When I was assigned, yeah, they said, you know, well, we need training, you know, and I trained, and they gave me that tank. Then I became tank commander,
Yeah.
and then about 3 months, or I mean about 3 weeks or so after that, I made sergeant.
Yeah. So was your tank ever disabled in combat, or?
Well, yes, these are World War II tanks.
What kind of tank was it?
The old, well, Coop, I'm blank.
Abrams maybe, or?
Sherman.
Sherman, okay.
Sherman tanks.
Yeah.
You know, the World War II, and they weren't built for those hills over in Korea. Korea has these valleys and all of these hills in, just.
Yeah.
And they were not built for those. And so we would throw a track. The track was filled with rubber and steel teeth, you know.
Right.
And we had to kick one of that out, put that back, and then use a crowbar and hammer, and it was a job to get it back on there. And then you had to go and tighten all the bolts.
Oh.
It was a mess, but that was the only problem we had.
Okay, so your tank was never disabled by enemy fire?
No.
Or anything like that? Okay.
But one time we were going out with the infantry.
Yeah.
Scattered out in front of us, and we were riding along right behind them, and we had this one little valley there, and the engineers had told us that they had checked for mines, and so I was number 3. We were number 3 tank. The first tank went across, went fine. The second tank hit a mine. He was in the track, but that one went off.
Oh.
And
boy.
here we are. I would have been next.
Oh yeah.
But anyway, then we call the retriever in. A retriever is a tank without all the information, but it has stuff that can lift it up and all that. the retriever backed into it in here to hook up.
Yeah.
It hit another mine,
Oh no, wow.
and the sergeant in charge of the retriever was hit in the face and with the shrapnel.
With shrapnel.
And-
Oh boy.
And he was bleeding like a sick hog, and they told me to put him on my tank, and we took off, and we went back to take him back to the first aid station.
Yeah.
Then they flew him on back into a MASH unit. But anyway, the interesting
Right.
thing about that was Cross was his name, and he was from West Virginia, sergeant. And he was bleeding like crazy, and we put cushions down on the back of the tank, laid him on that, and we took off. And he was laying on his back. We laid him on his back, and we were telling him, Cross, you're going to be okay and all that. And three of us were holding him. I was holding this one shoulder, and the other guy was holding the guy down here. And he would start to turn.
Oh.
No, don't do that, don't do that.
Yeah.
Finally, after we went through that about 3 or 4 minutes, and he did it again, and he lifted himself completely up, and he turned over on his side. He was bleeding, he was dying because he had too much blood on everything.
Going into his lungs, or oh
And-
gosh.
And so
Wow.
we were dumb. We were so dumb. We didn't know that we couldn't figure. I didn't know.
Yeah. Yeah.
But then I realized that he was wanting to get that blood out of his chest, you know.
Oh wow.
So we got him back. And anyway, the interesting thing about that is, 25 years later, our 70th Tank Battalion had a get-together in Fort Knox, Kentucky. And I went, and a couple of my buddies went, and this Cross went back. He came back, and he had 30 surgeries on his face here, and one thing and another.
Wow.
And he stayed in the Army, and he retired then at 30 years.
Golly.
And
Gee whiz.
anyway, I got to meet him, and
Yeah.
I gave him the picture of the tank and when he was just before he was hit. But
Oh,
that was-
you took a photograph of his tank just before it was hit?
yeah, you know.
Oh boy. Yeah. Wow.
But anyway, we three were trying to hold him down, and he wanted to turn over,
So he could
and
breathe,
he did.
yeah.
He lifted himself. All three of us holding him. He lifted himself up, so
Wow.
he's laying on his side, and he's
Yeah. Now, so how did he get to the medical unit, to the MASH unit? Did a Jeep come and get him, or a helicopter or something?
Yeah,
or?
no, they didn't. We didn't go clear back to the MASH unit. We just went to an aid station, they called them.
I see.
And
Yeah.
they happened to have a chopper there.
Yeah.
And they took it back to the MASH unit.
Yeah. So this was a case where tanks were hit by mines. Did you also experience actual combat where the enemy you're shooting back and forth and all that?
They used us to help the infantry when they're moving around, and also then we would be a hill. They would put us up here at the top of a hill so we could cover this whole area there, with
Wow.
the firepower.
Yeah.
And of course, every once in a while there'd be a charge. Usually the Chinese would come in at night, and of course the infantry crushed the worst of it, but we could give them some heavier fire,
Yeah.
And then there was a couple of those, can't think of the name of this one big mountain kind of a thing. And anyway, we were assigned to that, along several of us, and we were used to fire into these things so that they were digging tunnels and one thing and another.
The Chinese
And
and
they
the
were
North
using
Koreans
us
were?
as artillery. We could move right up close, and they would use us as artillery to fire at all of those.
Oh, I
And,
see. Yeah. Yeah.
And I did get to see 3 guys that I was in basic training with. They were in infantry. And they were, bless their hearts, they were in a trench up there on top of one of these hills. And I was so glad I was in a tank.
Oh.
Because we could scrounge anything. If we saw a blanket there, or we saw a bucket, or
Yeah.
whatever, we'd tie it on the back. We looked like gypsies.
Oh, yeah. You collecting things.
Yeah.
But what about these three guys you went through boot camp with? You were speaking of them. You saw them. They were in a trench.
Yeah, they were up. Yeah, they were up. We had just taken this hill. You know,
Yeah, yeah.
And they were in that trench on the, one of the trenches.
Yeah.
And we were up. We had taken the tank up too, and we were out wandering around. It was all over. And I happened to run those three guys that were in basic training with me.
Oh, yeah.
So,
But they're out there in a trench. You've got some cover then in the tank.
huh?
Yeah, they were out living out in the elements in the trench,
Oh,
but you
yeah,
at least had the tank.
We
Yeah.
were lucky, and another thing that I was lucky about is that this was in July, they started talking about having talks at Panmunjom about and we were picked our tank outfit was picked to go over there, and we were there a month as just simple to keep anybody if somebody started shooting again,
Yeah, yeah.
And
yeah.
so that was good duty,
To provide security, yeah.
And then
Yeah.
later on, when the armistice fell through, then in the fall of '51,
Yeah.
and then we started all over again.
The fighting
it's the
started
same
again.
thing,
Yeah.
And then the Oklahoma National Guard relieved us in December of '51.
December 51.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I didn't
Yeah.
have enough points. You had to have so many points for how many months you had been on boot, and I didn't. I was lacking 3 or 4 points, but yet I got to go. They sent the whole unit back.
You got to
So
go
there
home.
again, I didn't have to stay,
Yeah, yeah.
and so we went to Japan then.
Oh, I see. Now let's back up a little bit. What was the war in Korea all about? I mean, why were
what
was the war in Korea all about? What was why were Americans in Korea fighting anyway? What was the purpose of that war?
Well,
The war in Korea.
I don't know the purpose of the war. There are several of these things here that they question that same thing. But this is the first time in history that the United Nations had submitted troops to a war. Of course, we were the biggest one,
Yeah.
but there were some Vietnamese. Well, anyway. Anyway,
Yeah.
there were some British. We weren't close to them. They were on the other side of the world over there. But I remember those Brits. They had this candy. What are they famous for? What's the name of that candy? I can't say it right now. But anyway, we would trade a bottle of whiskey and for a bunch of this candy, and it's the sweetest thing in the world.
Huh, yeah.
But there were, I don't know, there were 22 nations, I think, that had people there.
Yeah, Canada was there, I think India,
But
a lot
most
of
of them,
countries.
see, the Turks were one of the and they said that the Turks were some of the best soldiers that was over there.
Yeah, yeah.
And the Turks, and there were some of those others that had a pretty good unit. The Brits did,
Yeah.
but a lot of these other countries just had hospital type people, or they didn't have many combat people.
Right, yeah. Yeah, what you're saying is that although we think of the Korean War as an American war, really it was a United Nations war.
Yeah.
And
Well,
the U.S. was the biggest part of that, but it was a
but-
United Nations war.
Everybody said, well, what's the United Nations worth anything,
Yeah.
But anyway, they did send, I think it was 22 troops.
22 different countries, yeah.
And this was to, I've got it written somewhere, and it tells about why,
Yeah.
just like you're at.
Well, because the North, the communist North had invaded the South, right? The communist North had invaded South Korea.
Oh yeah. Oh,
And-
here's
yeah.
here's the kicker
Yeah.
that people don't realize. The North Koreans wanted to they're the ones that started the war.
Yeah, yeah.
Guess what, though? They had all Chinese ammunition and guns and everything from China.
Yeah.
And then, they had the Chinese then came in, got full strength, and they were driving Russian tanks.
Oh boy, yeah.
And the Russian tanks weren't better.
Yeah.
Anyway, we were knocking them out of the, every time they hit one. And I was lucky. I got there till the tank-to-tank warfare was over about a month and a half, 2 months before I got there.
Oh, okay.
But so we were working with artillery and infantry.
Yeah. So you knew at the time that you were not just fighting North Koreans, you were also fighting Chinese. You knew during the war that you were fighting Chinese soldiers. Yeah.
And when I met those guys up on that hill, there was dead Chinese all around, and they had the Koreans had a different kind of uniform. It was rather slim on one thing and another. The Chinese had those big old fluffy type everything,
Right.
And they looked like a doll,
Yeah, yeah.
But anyway, you could tell the difference.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah.
We see images from the Korean War, or we hear when we hear about the Korean War. One of the things we hear about is the brutal cold in the winter. Did you experience that Korean winter?
I can vouch for that.
Yeah, yeah.
In the summertime, it got up to 90 degrees, and we'd be working on the tank and just be sweating like crazy.
Yeah.
It was 90. It'd get up to 90 degrees in the daytime.
Yeah.
And in the summertime. In the wintertime, it would go down to a minus 30.
Wow, wow.
And that is rough. And how those guys on the eastern part of Korea over there, I don't know how they did it, but when we were at that point, that was in the fall of 51, and we were put on each tank unit was put on kind of a dugout thing. Here's the top of a hill, and this is dug in so you could drive right up here, and you could cover here like this. And so we had a little bit of help there, but my driver and I would put down a piece of tarp, and then we had 2 sleeping bags. We'd put 2 sleeping bags on, each of us, and then we'd sleep there and keep our boots on. The rest of the tank guys were sleeping up in the tank, and it was cold as the devil because that metal is so cold.
Yeah, right.
And anyway, but Russell and I would sleep under the tank. But anyway, and so and I didn't know, we didn't know how cold it was, but there was this school up in St. Kansas City that has a lot of Korean stuff, and I asked them they looked it up, and what the temperature was on a particular day.
Wow.
And it got up to minus 31. And we had the government issued a different kind of shoe, I think what they call it now, but they had a rubber sole, and then they had padding all around and everything. And each day, you were supposed to check my buddy's feet, and he was going to check mine, so that you didn't lose any toes.
Yeah, wow. Did your tank operate okay in that cold?
Well, yeah. I mean, and the beauty of it was, with the tank, we could siphon gas into a can or something we picked up, and we could burn that, and we could get our hands warm anyway.
Wow, yeah.
There was GIs, those poor old boys. They didn't have anything.
Yeah, yeah. Were there or was there a time or two during your time in Korea when you got very close to North Koreans? I mean, did you ever get during battle? Did you get really close that you could actually see them?
Well, before we left, I was in the summer campaign and then the fall campaign. And so I've got a service star for each of those campaigns. But anyway, that was getting pretty salty. And then when all the talking got through, they couldn't come to an agreement
to end the war.
Then all of a sudden, around the 1st of January of '52, it really got rugged. And luckily we were out of there. We had just left for
I see.
Japan.
Yeah, yeah.
But '52 was really, we fired more artillery shells than they did in World War II.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow. What are your memories of the country itself? Because right now, of course, South Korea is wealthy. It's a prosperous country. What was South Korea like, or what was Korea like when you were there?
Well, the country was, you know, there was farming, these valleys and everything. They had water in them where they were raising rice and one thing and other. And some of that stuff was hard to get through, you know. But whenever they had a little hill or a little knoll, that's where their house was. And they were, this goes way back to 1,000 years ago, I guess, but they would build a little house and with clay and tighten it up around the bottom, and then they would have a box kind of a thing over here on this wall, and this is where their fire would be. Then they would have some boards to cover that, and the heat would come over here all the way up through the house.
Yeah.
All those little homes were like that.
Wow. And so the people you saw in Korea at the time were pretty poor.
We didn't run into any really, other than some going down they're going back south, you know, on the road when we were traveling up a highway or something.
So they were trying to get away from the combat.
Oh, yeah, you know, it was brutal, you know.
Yeah, yeah. So how long were you in Korea altogether?
I was in Korea, let's say, 7 months.
7 months.
Yeah, and I should have been there 12 months, 11, 12 months, you know.
Yeah.
But I got to come home. I got to come back to Japan.
Yeah.
But I was there 7 months, yeah.
Okay. And how long were you in the Army altogether?
3 years.
3 years in the Army.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so in Japan, I picked to help. The Japanese were starting a new military. They couldn't call it an army. They called it
I think a defense force or something like that.
National. Oh shoot.
Defense or
anyway, I've got
like
it written down.
Yeah.
But anyway,
Yeah.
so they were starting schools down there for these different units, and then we got to go down there to central Japan. And we had a heavy mortar school, we had an armor school, and we had an artillery school, all in the same group.
Yeah.
But we had to teach through interpreters.
Right, sure,
you know.
yeah.
And all the manuals had to be rewritten in Japanese.
In Japanese, yeah.
But it was good duty, and
Sure.
you know.
But now you had combat experience, so you could talk to them.
So
about
I was
that.
down there for until that was almost a year, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
Are you glad you served in the Army?
do what?
Are you glad you served in the Army?
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
I knew every time since I was about 8, 9 years old, I wanted to be in the Army because my dad was in the Army in World War I. He was wounded on his head, and I knew I was going to be in the Army. And my older brother was also in the Army. He was in the Signal Corps. He wasn't in any. He was stationed in Japan. Then he went to Japan, Korea. And after we took everything, you know, they went to Anshan, and they were selling these, oh shoot, these, well, I got them right here. This is what he was doing. They were, these things.
Oh, yeah.
Surrender.
Let me just put this in front
Turn
of
on the other side.
Yeah, so this is propaganda. He's
And we would
basically telling the Chinese how to surrender.
Those. We would fire those, and so they would scatter over the line over there in Korea.
Yeah.
And there weren't many of them that ever took that, and they've got some.
Sure.
I've got some here for the North Koreans, and they say, "Well, come see us. We'll take care of you." Blah blah. It was
Right.
oh,
yeah. Yeah, so kind of an inducement, if you surrender, we'll treat you well and give you nice meals.
Propaganda, you know, it's propaganda.
Yeah. Let's look at I want to look at some things that, when we met before, you very kindly gave me some things that I've used in my classes, and these are things that you brought home from the war. And so maybe you could just tell us.
Talking about their homes,
Yeah.
these two pieces there came out of one little house, and we were kind of digging around that. There wasn't. It was just.
Yeah.
You could tell there was had been a house there. There was nothing standing or anything, and we were digging around.
Yeah.
And those are made in China.
These bowls here are made in China. Now, you found these in a home that had been destroyed by...
Yeah, it had been there, and with all those little old homes out in the villages, you know, they'd had army going through them 4 different times. When the Koreans came through, and then we came back through. And then the Chinese came in, and then we went back through.
Yeah.
So there were some of those homes had been.
So
there was a couple of those little these.
Let me see. I'll just put this.
Those pictures were there.
Yeah. By the time you found this home, it had been destroyed, and so this is just basically debris that you found. And here's another photo that you found, and just artifacts from that war. Now, what is this photo here? I'll put the photo in front of the camera, and then I'll show it to you. What is this photo?
Where is? I can't even tell what. Oh yeah, that's me in front of. That one hadn't been knocked down. Most of them are burned or whatever, you know.
So this is you in front of a home in South Korea. There.
But that idea of that pipe underneath the floor was really, you know, I guess I thought that was unique.
Oh, the way of keeping the home warm.
They could build a fire over here, and the smoke could go out over here, but the heat would come up this way.
Yeah. Do you know are there other Korean War veterans that you know in the area? Are there other Korean War veterans you know in the area?
No, I really don't. I belong to the Vietnam National outfit. You know, I get a magazine once in a while. But I don't know of anybody really. And all of my buddies are, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 3 of my buddies were all gone now, you know.
Yeah. Well, Korea is kind of that forgotten war, isn't it?
You what?
Korea is kind of that forgotten war, isn't it? Between World War II and Vietnam.
Nobody knows.
Yeah. What did you, when you came home, did you feel that the people in the United States appreciated your service overseas? Or?
No. I remember just before I went overseas, I was home. And I don't know why I had on my khakis and one thing and another, and I was downtown in West Plains, Missouri, and this lady that was in my class, she was a brain and everything, and she said, "Oh, Rex," she says, "how you doing? What is that?" And I said, "Well, I'm in the Army." And she said, "I thought you were smarter than that." I never will forget that.
Yeah.
But anyway.
Well, there are plenty of very smart people in the Army.
But when we came home, and it burns me up, the Vietnam people, they all come home and they cry and say that nobody and they needed this and they needed that and everything.
Yeah.
There was none of that with our bunch. They all went back to school. They went to work. They didn't and you know that was the end of it.
So you know, you guys came home from Korea. For you, there were no parades, no welcome parties.
Nobody. You got We got $110 a month. To go to school.
Yeah.
$110 a month.
Yeah. Did you ever, after getting out of the Army, did you ever consider going back in?
No.
To the Army?
You know, when I was in Fort Riley and I was ready to be finally wipe out there, this old senior sergeant, he says, I made sergeant first class.
Uh-huh.
And not many people do in 3 years.
Yeah, that's moving.
But anyway, he said, if you'll stay here, and he says, I guarantee in 3 or 4 months you'll be a master sergeant.
Wow.
And I'd always dreamed about a master sergeant. They're the tough guys. But I said, no. I said, I'm not interested. I want to raise a family. I want to do things.
Sure.
So.
And you had seen combat already.
Yeah. So I didn't.
You had seen.
I never really considered it.
Yeah.
Now my younger brother joined the Navy right out of high school, and knock on wood, he was the smart one of the bunch. And he pulled 22 years in the Navy.
Wow.
He went in as a seaman recruit. He ended up with a lieutenant commander.
Wow.
In charge of, he was a nuclear, I forget his title, but it was a nuclear something. He'd been on a nuclear sub.
Oh. He
he
was in the Navy during the Vietnam era.
Yeah. He would be out, for a month or 2 months at a time. They never went upside.
Yeah.
They were always down below.
Yeah.
He was a blue nose because he was up under the ice cap.
Yeah, right up in the Arctic. When you think about your service in Korea, what is there a particular memory? Is there one particular memory that's especially strong for you when you think about your time in Korea?
Well,
or a particular thought or a particular idea? And I mean, what for you is important about the war in Korea?
Well, I don't know all of that. I know that a lot of people have written about Korea after it was all over. The interesting thing is that they finally signed the
Armistice?
Yeah, anyway, they finally signed that in '53,
Yeah.
and the war ended there.
Yeah.
However, South Korea did not sign. Technically, they're still at war with North
that's
Korea.
right. Yeah, North and South are still technically at war.
So
Now, have you been back to South Korea since 1951?
no, my brother has. He got to go over there.
Sure.
He was with the Missouri Chamber of Commerce, and they went over.
Yeah.
And they got to see Seoul.
Oh.
And of course, Seoul was beautiful, big.
Well,
and now it's twice that big.
I was in South Korea just a year ago, and Seoul is a very impressive, very prosperous country, and you have something to do with that because North Korea is poor and corrupt, and South Korea is rich.
They don't have anything to eat up there in North Korea.
Yeah.
A yo-yo up there, and I don't know what's going to happen with that.
Well, I mean, because I know that in 1953 a lot of people thought that the Korean War was a loss because the North was still communist.
Yeah.
But South Korea South Korea did not become communist, and South Korea is now a prosperous country, and that's thanks to what you guys did.
South Korea is rated as one of the top 10 countries in the world as far as manufacturing and all of that.
That's right. Well, Rex, one last question. I think we'll look at some of your photographs in a different conversation, but one last question for now. What's your advice for if you had one thing to say to young people today? What would your word of advice be for young people today?
Well, if they really want to do something, do it, but I always knew what I wanted to do. And I have done them, I knew I wanted to be a soldier and I wanted to be a mason, and I've been a mason for 50 years.
Okay.
So, and I've got some grandkids right now that they just got back from Europe. There's two brothers, and they spent 3 weeks over there in different places in Spain and one thing, and I'm so thrilled. I'll show you in my book. I started a catalog for each one of us in our family and where they've traveled. And I'm so proud of that.
Oh,
They've got that thing in their head, and
Sure.
This other one just wrote me yesterday, and he says, I'm in the Canary Islands. He says, I love it. He said, it's so laid back, and he says, you can think, and one thing and another. And he's made a lot of money and out in California, and he says, I'm going to spend another 4 or 5 days.
Yeah.
So,
So it sounds like your advice to young people is to set your eyes on important things and pursue them.
well,
You know, set your eyes on important things
Yeah.
and chase those goals.
Yeah, you know,
that's
you've
right.
got to, you have to be thinking, and you have to do things that, otherwise you're not going to be happy. I wish I'd have done that. I wish I'd have done that.
Yeah.
You know, and we all do that to a certain extent,
Yeah.
but you can't let it get a hold of you. You know?
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
You try to do something and try to do it well, and
That's right. Well, Rex, thank you very much for talking with us. I appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you for talking with us. Thank you.
I wish I could remember some of those things, but anyway.
It's a long time ago, but thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Right. But anyway.
Yeah. So this is the song that they were playing when the guys from Korea were getting off the ship,
Yeah.
and a lot of them were wounded. They were coming home from Korea. Many of them were wounded. This is the song you remember them playing. Go ahead and sing a little bit of the song for us.
Well, the Fort Mason band was playing a song as these men came down the runway. The song was played over and over again until the last man. The song was something I'd never heard before. It was loving, enchanting, and haunting. I still have that in my brain. Many years ago, I learned what the piece was. It was My Hero from the operetta The Chocolate Soldier, written by Oscar Strauss in 1908. It was written in German and then was reproduced on the New York stage in 1941. The words are, "Come, come, come, I love you only. Come, my heart is true. Come, come, my life only longs for you." And it goes on and on and on.
And that's how it went. And they played this song over and over again while all the soldiers got off the ship.
And then we're waiting to get aboard, and the band was playing Now Is the Hour. This was popular in the 40s and 50s because so many men were off to war. The tune is a Maori farewell song. The Maoris are a Polynesian people that live in New Zealand. The words are American. Now is the hour when we must say goodbye. Soon you'll be sailing far across the sea. While you're away, please remember me. When you return, you'll find me waiting here. It was first published in Australia in 1913. It was picked up in World War II and became a sentimental favorite. Bing Crosby recorded it at the end of the war. This song took on a universal appeal.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Hickox. Appreciate it.